Azure, and I've labeled this one the odd one out because the licensing model for Azure is quite different to what we've seen so far. Azure is Microsoft's growing set of integrated services to help customers move faster, do more, and save money. That's what Microsoft says. And buying Azure, you can buy it via a partner through the CSP program, through a volume licensing agreement, direct from Microsoft through an internal sales person, or direct through Microsoft Azure.com. And we should add another point here is that it's currently available in the Microsoft Customer Agreement. And the Microsoft Customer Agreement is a new Microsoft licensing contractual vehicle. We'll dive into that a little bit more in the next slides. But first, how does it differ to other cloud licensing programs from Microsoft? Well, with Microsoft Azure, you initiate the full potential by setting up a subscription. So you don't have to buy a specific set of products and get that functionality assigned. No, you buy Microsoft Azure, and then you can use all the Azure services that there are in the portal. So if you say to a Microsoft sales representative, I want to buy Azure, they will set you up with a contract, whatever that contract looks like. It will grant you the access to use any and all Azure services that are present. When your subscription is set up, you definitely only start paying when you start using any of the Azure services. So setting up your account doesn't immediately mean that you're getting charged. You're getting charged when you start consuming resources in the Microsoft Azure portal. And resources can mean anything, and all resources have their own unit of measure. So a VM can go by hour, storage goes by dollar per gigabyte or transaction, databases are charged per gigabyte, etc., etc. And within a tenant, so you obviously set up your tenant environment, you can have multiple subscriptions for different parts of your company or organization. This means that you can set up an organizational structure, do cost management by setting up a hierarchy that fits your organization's structure. Payment is generally done monthly in arrears based on actual consumption. Depends a bit sometimes on the services, but usually for most services it's monthly in arrears for the actual consumption of any and all resources that you have used in the Azure environment. And a side note here is that if you're buying Azure through the enterprise agreement, as of November 1st, 2019, commercial customers in direct markets cannot initiate or renew an Azure-only server and cloud enrollment, or introduce Azure to an enterprise enrollment that did not previously include Azure. This means that if you have not already bought Azure in your EA, or if you're interested in purchasing Azure through an EA, you can no longer do so. And Microsoft basically forces you to move to the Microsoft Customer Agreement, which is their new contract. And do find our training on this on our YouTube channel, because it's quite a new contract from Microsoft. It only handles Azure at the moment. It can't handle custom terms very well or at all. So if you are in a heavily customized enterprise agreement, Microsoft will probably still allow you a concession to use or start using Azure in your EA. If not, you should potentially investigate the customer agreement or finding a cloud services provider, solution provider to help you with your contract. Good news is this is only for direct markets. So if you're in an indirect model, basically buying through your enterprise agreement through an LSP, then you're still able to add Azure to your contract. Now, I want to take another step to understand your payment options and your commitment levels in an enterprise agreement or in the Microsoft Customer Agreement, because those are the same. Like I said, you will be paid monthly in arrears based on actual consumption. That's true for the pay-as-you-go method. You use the services in your contract, and you get invoiced in arrears on your actual use. So if you use 5 VMs, you get invoiced at the end of the month for those 5 VMs and any storage that you've used in these VMs. If you're quite a heavy user of Microsoft Azure and you think, I'm willing to let Microsoft know the amount of consumption that I think I'm going to do over a period of time, and that's usually 3, 4, 5 years, you can sign up to a Microsoft Azure consumption commitment, or MAC. And MAC is basically a paper commitment, and it states to Microsoft that you are potentially going to spend an X amount of Azure consumption over the term of, let's take 3 years. And you will be able to start consuming, still get invoiced in arrears month over month. But at the end of the term of your contract, you will, together with Microsoft, look at your actual consumption. If your consumption is equal to what you, or over what you have discussed with Microsoft, there's not an issue. But if you have consumed less than what you have discussed with Microsoft, then Microsoft reserves the right to bill. And with the I should say, with the Microsoft customer agreement that they've released, they have become a bit more lenient on this clause, in the sense that with the Mac, they will allow you another 12-month period to fully spend that amount. Now, finally, the prepayment version means that, similar to a Mac, you will tell Microsoft how much you're going to spend or think you're going to spend over the coming 3 years, but they will send you an invoice for that full amount upfront for the entire 3-year period. And this means that if you say, I'm going to spend 2 million over the coming 3 years, they will invoice you immediately for the 2 million. 2 million will appear in your Azure portal as a credit, and all your consumption will month over month be deducted from that 2 million until it reaches 0. When it reaches 0, you will move into what they call overage. So then you will be billed month over month for the charges that you have on top of the prepayment that you have fully consumed. What happens if you pay less? Then Microsoft will not give you your money back. So if you prepay 2 million, you spend 1.5 million, Microsoft says, thank you very much. That is 500,000 free of charge for Microsoft. You can have very nasty conversations with Microsoft around this topic. So we basically never advise on doing a prepayment. Always investigate a Mac. The incentives that you usually get on Mac versus prepayment don't differ that much anymore. And it's basically based on the Microsoft subsidiary that you're contracting with, if they are very interested in billed revenue or not. One more point that I was going to make on these prepayments. On an enterprise agreement, if you buy Azure in an enterprise agreement, you have what they call a pricing threshold. So in an EA, for all your services, you typically have a 3-year price guarantee, which means that your prices throughout the term of the enrollment will remain the same. That is also true with Azure. But with Azure, you see quite a lot of price decreases over the term of your enrollment, and they do allow you to benefit from these. So if they lower a price, you will benefit from it. If they have to uplift the price, you won't be negatively affected, because in your enterprise agreement there is a threshold and they can't bill you more than the services are costing at the start of your contractual term. This removes in the MCA. It might be making its way back in a certain type of commitment model, but basically in the Microsoft customer agreement, like with CSP and the website purchases, you will always pay the price that is relevant for that month. So looking at programmatic cost reduction possibilities for Microsoft Azure and things that you should always investigate are the Azure Hybrid Benefit and reserved instances. On Azure Hybrid Benefit, we've done a deep dive around pricing and how you can make of how much savings you can get by making use of Azure Hybrid Benefit for Windows Server and or SQL. But what Azure Hybrid Benefit basically is it's a benefit for your Windows Server and SQL Server licenses that you have with software assurance in your enterprise agreement or elsewhere, where you have licenses with software assurance, and this will help you reduce the cost of your VMs and databases. So if you use your on-premises licenses with software assurance, you don't have to pay the Windows or SQL Server charges in your VMs. You just pay for the bare hard metal, so to say. As most Microsoft customers have software assurance on Windows Server and or SQL Server, always investigate if you what entitlements you have and how you can leverage that in the Azure cloud. There's always some differences because, for instance, for Windows Server Data Center, you're able to use it both on-premise and in the Azure cloud. But for Windows Server Standard, it's an either or. So you either use it on-prem or you use it in the Azure cloud. This helps you also, and it helps Microsoft also, to not cannibalize on any investments that you have done in these products. So Microsoft likes this as well because that's revenue for them that they don't want to really touch on. And it helps you reduce your spend. So basically it cuts both ways. It's easy to set up if you're already running images in the Azure cloud, having VMs spun up. You can allocate by setting a checkbox, I believe, and the Azure Hybrid Benefit to them, and start immediately reducing the price of your VMs. And finally, if you're using old versions of Windows Server, for instance, or SQL Server, if you're using Azure Hybrid Benefit and move your old versions to the Azure cloud, you don't have to pay for extended security updates if you want to receive these. Then reserved instances. Reserved instances are a way to create massive savings for your virtual machines within Microsoft Azure, because it allows you to lock in a certain VM type in a specific data center, and it will, because of you locking it in for a longer period of time, 1 year or 3 years, it will be able to get you savings of up to 72% on specific VMs. If you leverage Azure Hybrid Benefit with this, it could even mean that you start spending 80% less than what you're doing if you're using pay-as-you-go. You can either choose reserved instances to be paid in full upfront, or you can be billed in monthly arrears for them. Prepayment of your RIs might make sense if you, for instance, have done a prepayment of your full Azure credits, and you have need a means to spend a lot of your remaining Azure prepayment. With reserved instances, there are always options to either cancel them or exchange them. So canceling means that you stop using them. There might be a termination fee applied, and there's a cap to the total amount of reserved instance, monetary cap, I should say, to the total value that you can return by canceling a reserved instance. I think it's around $50,000 a year. You can exchange an RI as well. So if you're using a reserved instance on a D series version 3, but Microsoft releases a D series version 4, which I've done in the past, and you want to move to this newer version, you can cancel your DV3 reserved instance and choose to reallocate them to DV4 reserved instances. The total cost is then calculated for the new term, so another 1 or 3 year term, and the remaining cost of the exchanged RI, so to say, is reduced from that total. So you won't lose any money there. Reserved instances can be assigned at enrollment level or at the subscription level. And that means that you can manage this at an organization or a department level. So if you assign it at an enrollment level, it will basically trickle down and find all the different VMs that you have and assign an RI to it. But if that doesn't work for you because a specific department has bought these RIs and other departments cannot make use of these, do assign them at your subscription level to make sure that the ones that are paying for it are getting the benefit from it. This is a slide taken from our negotiation clinic. As Microsoft Azure is quite different from other cloud services that Microsoft licensed, there's also very different concessions that you can get. And I wanted to take a little bit of time to run through these. So the first you see is the Azure Commitment Discount. This is a discount that you get on the entire Microsoft Azure services stack. So all the consumption products that they have, the discount will be associated to. And this is a dynamic discount. So if any price decreases happen, the Azure Commitment Discount will lower with them. With the second point, the flexibility. Like I said, keep away from the upfront prepayment commitment model. It often can be quite practical if you have budget remaining or something like that. Investigate it, but we always advise against it because what we've seen many times is that you will spend maybe less than you are entitled or envisioned that you were going to spend, and then you forfeit any of the remaining amount, and Microsoft will have basically free money from you. Agreements spanning more than 3 years are quite easily possible. So if you are able to set up a 5-year cloud consumption plan for Microsoft Azure, Microsoft is often willing to listen and help you set up a contract in such a way. Line item discounts are possible, meaning that if you know that this specific product you are going to use quite a lot for a specific type of services and the price just doesn't fit the return on investment, then do request an additional higher discount on these items. Please note that these are static discounts. So if the price of the product lowers, that discount will not lower with it, but it will eventually even out on a new list price. You can get, in certain cases, get Azure credits, meaning that you get free Azure money in your portal to consume against. This can happen in 2 ways. Either you get it upfront by signing your contract, or what might happen is you get it after you hit a certain threshold. So you're saying, we're going to do 5 million in the coming 5 years. How are you going to incentivize me? Well, if you make that target of 2.5 million in 2.5 years, then we're giving you $250,000 of free Azure credits, something like that. Be considerate with contract model you choose. We advise to stay in EA, EAS, or SE in this time. And if you're not using it in those contracts right now, try and find a way to do this, because it gives you that pricing threshold that I already described. And the new Microsoft Customer Agreement just doesn't do that. As stated as well, Azure Hybrid Benefit, while it's a programmatic means, a lot of organizations are not leveraging this to their utmost benefit. I suggest you always have your eye out for the entitlements that you have. Always look at how you can leverage Azure Hybrid Benefit, because you're paying for the licenses. If you're not using the licenses on-prem, use them in your Azure cloud. Finally, something that can happen but not seen a lot. If you're negotiating a new contract and you're investigating a prepayment, but you already spent your previous prepayment and are consuming as such in overage, you can request to not pay the overage, but have this overage deducted from your new prepayment. So The takeaways here: 1, set up an account. That's free of charge. You can set up your account. You don't have to do anything. You start paying when you start consuming services within your environment. We can't stress this enough because we see a lot of issues with it. Set up a good cloud cost management framework before you start consumption. This will save you money in the long term. If you just start going at it, thinking of Microsoft Azure as a means to an end, like you do your hosted environment, then you're quickly going to see that it might end up becoming much more costly than what you are worth envisioning of the cloud services. 3, pay only for what you use. That might seem easy, but it's quite more difficult than you seem. And what I mean by that is, for instance, if you're using Azure to host a large dev test environment, switch your environment off outside of office hours. It's a very easy one, but it's something that many companies don't do correctly. Review your spend on a monthly basis, or at least a quarterly basis. Look for easy optimizations and ask questions like, is there a newer version of the VMs I currently use? It will most likely be cheaper. Do I need to run my VMs 24/7? If so, can I use a reserved instance? Am I using the right type of storage, or can I use a cheaper version? For instance, why are you using geo-redundant storage? If your usage grows month over month, decide if you want to work towards price commitment and its added incentives. So look into the Microsoft Azure consumption commitment, for instance. If you think that your spend is going to blow out of proportions in the coming months, you want to get ahead of that and negotiate a contract with Microsoft. Give them commitment, and in turn, you might get some of the concessions that we talked about. Finally, leverage your items that save you money. Reserved instance and Azure Hybrid Benefit are always the way to go, if you ask me.